start this series on energy anatomy with a personal journey into my own background, because so many people have asked questions about the nature of medical intuition, about what it is to be a medical intuitive, and I would like to demythologize a lot of the information and a lot of the ideas that surround this skill. What I've learned in my work is that the common ingredient in every single dysfunction is an issue of power. And so that's going to be the common word I'm going to repeat again and again and again. And what I now realize is that our physical body is a construction of spiritual power. And that we are, each of us, scheduled to evolve through levels, stages of empowerment. And our body is a complete reflection of exactly what lessons we learn and when. So, having said that, I'm going to jump back to my introduction. I began to work with medical intuition in 1982-83. I moved to New Hampshire to start a publishing company with two colleagues, a publishing company called Still Point. At that time, I had finished my graduate work, and my graduate work was in mysticism and schizophrenia. And I was a journalist. And when I was writing newspaper articles in Chicago after graduating from college, I kept thinking there's got to be more to life than hog reports. And given my background, which was growing up with nuns, I was fluent in the monastery. The romance people are having with mystic life was something that was my first nature when I was a kid. So that having someone talk Angel 101 to me was ordinary, thank God. And in those early years, I remember thinking there's got to be more to life than this. And I was driving to pick up a friend of mine for dinner, a friend who at the time was a nun. I was in Chicago, my hometown, and I was at the corner of Central and North Avenue. I put the car in park, and I said to God, if you don't tell me what you want from me, I will not drive anymore at any time. In fact, prepare to meet me because I'm coming home. Now the thing is, I didn't mean it in a necessarily sort of ordinary suicidal thing. I was having an absolute spiritual temper tantrum. And the thing is, I fully expected an answer and I got one. It never occurred to me that I would not get the vision I was invoking. And in that moment, I saw the graduate school. And you got to understand something. I never had been to this school. I simply went into an altered state, drove right there, exploded into the graduate department, and announced to the nuns that the time had come for me to begin my work in theology. And Sister Carol Francis Jagan looked at me and said, okay, all right. And she said, you have to apply. And I said, yeah, don't worry about it. I'll take care of that. And I said, look, if I can't cut it, you're going to know. And I'm the one who's out the $400 per class. So hey, right? And Catholics speak finances. So I made this deal with the nunsies and I started my work in theology. Became mesmerized with the study of mysticism and schizophrenia. Why we go mad on our way to becoming empowered. Why madness is essential toward empowerment. Why do we need to go mad? But we do. How come? Right? I have never met anybody who has not gone through or will go through madness on their way to becoming healthy or whole. It is inevitable. Now, why is that so? Isn't that a rich question, right? Well, I was captivated by that. And then in 1982, I had an out-of-body experience. It was no big deal. There wasn't a lot of, lights or actions or cameras. I sort of always get low-grade mystical experiences. I never get the sophisticated variety, but I get them. Nevertheless, you don't want to complain, mind you, but, it's not exactly the Neiman Marcus version. However, I knew that my life was different. And I knew that I'd been asked a question, and that was perception. Now, I work as a medical intuitive. Those words weren't there, but I knew the way of the non-physical world, and that I was being asked, will you work with us? Translation, will you make the non-physical world your authority over the physical? Now, having just come from studying it academically, as though you can ever study God. Oh, spare me that perception now. I humbly retort, right? But I now knew that when you invoke heaven, heaven comes. But heaven says, I'm going to cause you to change the rules. The first thing that motivates you is to invoke heaven in order to make your life physically comfortable. And heaven has no regard for physical comfort. Now, back to the community in Northern State. Then agreed. I said to the gods, you cheat, you play dirty, and I will do this. And it was a very painful agreement because, as in keeping with every truth, what you are relinquishing is the illusion that you had any authority over your life to start with. I remember pursuing this, running away from it to the point where I ran away to the Finhorn community in northern Scotland. And I met Eileen Caddy, who has since become someone I have loved dearly for many, many years now. I told her that I wanted to interview her, that I was a journalist. During the course of the interview, I said to her, tell me something. When you heard these voices, did you believe them? Did you believe them? And she looked at me. And Eileen is your quintessential classic British. She couldn't make up something if she had to. Dishonesty couldn't fit in her corset. You know what I mean? So she said, my dear, I think you've come here, but not to speak to me. Ooh, that's all I heard. And it was that simple truth that broke me in half. And it was there at Finhorn that I said to God, you win, I'll do this. And that began my life as a medical intuitive. In the early days, I was also a publisher. I moved to a town called Walpole, New Hampshire, and I began to work with two wonderful people. And I didn't put up a sign, medical intuitive. Do you understand how peculiar this is? The part of me that spoke theology and spoke the gods fluently was totally amused that it was operating exactly the way I was told it would. Spontaneous things happening. And whenever I would pray help along the lines of helping others, it was there immediately. And for myself, it wasn't. I thought that was amusing too. Or so I thought. I could pick up an illness in people. In the early days, I did not know why you became ill. I had no idea that there was an energetic component to illness. I knew none of this. And I want to emphasize that I knew none of it at all. What happened was, in 1985, I was at a conference as a publisher, and I was introduced to a man named Dr. Norman Shealy. And the reason they introduced, that Norm and I met was, and I want to emphasize, I was invited there as a publisher. No one knew I was a baby medical clairvoyant. And someone said, that doctor over there, Norm Shealy, he's real interesting. He studies people who are medically clairvoyant. Now, come on, right? And I'm in Kansas, where Christ lost a Jew, for God's sake. I mean, who would ever hear of a medical intuitive in Kansas, right? So I said to him, Dr. Shealy, could I talk to you for a minute? And he said, what do you want? And I said, I think I'm one of those people who is medically clairvoyant. And Norm prides himself on not being able to be impressed. Some people pride themselves on money. He wouldn't waste his time there. Rather, it's that he knows everything. Or he knows someone who knows it before you do. So he says, yeah, well, how good are you? I said, I don't know. He says, can you see a brain tumor? And I said, I don't know. And then he looked at me and he said, I don't need anyone to tell me someone's energy is off. I can do that much. And he said, how good are you? I said, I don't know. Well, he called me the next month. It was the first time I did a reading at a distance. I was living in Walpole, New Hampshire. His clinic's in Springfield, Missouri. He called up, he would say, I have Mary Smith in my office. She's 30 years old. What information do you want? And I said, I don't know, let's just start with that. And instantaneously impressions began. And the impressions had to do with why she was losing power in my language today. Why she was losing power, to whom she was losing power, and what the cost of it was to her biologically. In the early days, I could say to Norm, the throat area feels like concrete. That began to be my image, my symbol for cancer. The only reason I knew that I must be doing a good job is because Norm called back. He never ever said, ooh, wow. And that was a gift because it kept me detached from the outcome. And all of my ambition and all of my high voltage desire to accomplish anything continued to pour into the publishing company versus becoming a medical intuitive. Do you understand the gift in this? If I can teach you a million things simultaneously, one of the truths is that the image of the birth in the manger, I will frequently and always refer to scriptural images, whether they're in the Vedic scriptures, the Judaic, the Christian, it matters not. I like images that convey truth. The image of the birth in the manger is a high voltage image that I would ask you to consider and hold in your heart, that when something of great importance is given to you, it is always going to be born humbly. You will think it looks like it has no power. When something looks like it has no power, get on your knees in front of it. All right? The gods never take a room at the... So, what happened was that as Norm and I began to work with this skill, the only reason I knew that I must have some leverage of talent was that he would call back. And it got to the point where, just picture this, I would be in my office, I would be reading manuscripts, I was the editor at the publishing company, the phone would ring, I'd prop it in my neck, and Norm, and he'd say, Mary Jones, age 30, and I'd say, leukemia coming in, da-da-da-da-da-da, translation, can't reconcile her divorce, got divorced, had 2 abortions when she was 24, gotcha, call you back, bingo. That was the way our readings would go. And I only figured they must be good because he phoned back. Now the thing that also happened is simultaneously I was seeing people privately. They would come to the publishing company. And so from around 3:30 on, I did private rooms. And I found this to be one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. 1, I don't have the personality of a therapist or a healer. 2, I don't have the personality of a therapist or a healer. And 3, I don't have the personality. All right? So when somebody wants to come up to me and say, Carolyn, why is my life falling apart? And expect me to have an answer and explain the mind of God when my life is falling apart. This is not the role I wanted in this planet. So it was driving me nuts. And I would do my readings before somebody would get there. And I felt like I was living on that painful needle of trying to explain to people why their lives were falling apart. I didn't have an explanation for that. And for Christ's sake, my life wasn't together. Then one day, this woman comes in. She's got malignancy everywhere. And I knew she was going to ask me, why am I dying? Now, that's not a question that's easy to answer. And one of the things that I realized again and again and again, and if I could communicate this, I will teach you this, to never ever think nor want the God you relate to think like a human being. Human logic, human cause and effect. The gods don't work that way. Heaven does not work according to human justice. That is something that you will live a lot better with if you absorb that reality, that heaven does not live according to human justice, but that divine justice and how it plays out and its timing is perfect. Now then, this woman shows up and I said to her, you are coping with malignancies and da-da-da-da. And she said, well, I know that. And she said, but Carolyn, can't you tell me why? And there it was, the question I was dreading, and I wanted to pick her up and throw her out and say, why do I look like my life is so together that I could answer the mysteries of your life? I mean, yeah. And what happened was that some energy entered my body, and it pushed me aside in that moment. And it was as if this energy said, I'm going to answer this question and you're going to pay attention. Not that you are necessarily in a negotiating position when this kind of phenomenon happens to you. This energy spoke to this woman using my vocal cords. And this energy said to her, all right, let's go back. And took her back through every trauma of her life that apparently had anything to do with the reason why she was, in this day, malignant and dying. Now, this recall included the smallest prayers that she said. I'm talking tiny. Who recorded these prayers? What is this non-physical world that listens to us so intently? I couldn't believe this. So, while this presence was answering her voice, this whole time, mind you, she thought she was talking to me. Where I was, I felt that I was about an inch high, hovering inside my left ear. When this was over, I said to this force, as though I had any clout, look, let me make you a deal. Please don't let her know that this is not me talking. And no sooner did I say that prayer than I found myself removing my hand from her leg, with no memory of ever having reached out to touch her. And she never said, how did you know that? It was completely eclipsed. All she said to me was, oh, I can live with this and I can die with this now. And I never saw her again. But I walked out of there and I sat in the open field behind this publishing company and I said to myself, God, what is this mystery that we live? How do we reconcile this incredible journey, that our lives are such mysteries, but you hear every prayer, that we seem to live in such disclarity, but you're there at every moment? So I said, you win. What a joke. As if I ever had any clue. What was I going to do? Go ahead, God, get someone else, right? Yeah, go ahead. See how successful you'll be without me. Do you understand? I mean, wake up, Mace. Right. All right. Hello. So that was the green light. After that, the skill got better. The skill matured as I matured. That's the only way I can put it. And the skill got more and more sophisticated. I began to pick up more and more internal images of depth of a person's psychological life. I began to see us as mandalas, as incredible tapestries of energy. I began to understand the way we're constructed very differently. And I began to see archetypal patterns. Eventually, I began to pick up what I would call our archetypal influences, what I now understand to be our contracts, what I refer to as our sacred contracts, the agreements we make before we incarnate, that we have archetypal connections. It's really quite rich and quite fascinating. Having said that, the next logical question is, what do I see when I do an evaluation on somebody? What do you look like to me? Right? I'm going to take you in behind my eyes to show you the map, if you will. I guess the best way to imagine this is to do away with what you think I might be perceiving. And that's that the perception of energetic information, for me, is very non-theatrical. I don't see anything. I don't see visions. I don't see lots of colors. I don't have lots of sounds. I'm very non-audio, non-kinesthetic. I'm nothing. All I do is I've mastered the science of being able to interpret energetic information. That's all. And so do a reading on somebody. I wait for information to come to me that I know doesn't belong to me. Now, if I said to you, I want you to imagine your living room right now. And if I said to you, I have no idea what an imagination's like, tell me what that's like. What's it like to have a memory? I can't do that. What would you say to me? How would you describe a memory? Are you actually really seeing something, or do you think you're seeing something? Or are you thinking it with such familiarity that you think you're seeing it? There's a crossroads, if you will, between thinking and seeing that is this place called knowing. And that's what I perceive when I do a reading. As if I said to you, perceive your living room. Now imagine that you could perceive my living room with the same fluency. The only difference is you would have no emotional feeling whatsoever for any of the little odds and ends that are all around the place, because they're my sentimental objects, not yours. So you would view them completely impersonally. They would mean nothing to you. You'd see them with absolute clarity, and you'd be able to say, oh, she's got a couch by the window and a chair by the fireplace. She's got a candlestick here. She's got a painting there. She likes the color fuchsia. She likes the color teal. And you have no feeling about it. Now that's exactly what it's like when I pick up your energy and when I read your energy system. I get your information, and it comes to me somewhat in an orderly way because I want it to come in an orderly way. I've organized it so that I go after your tribal information first, and then I follow the chakras because that's logically how we grow and develop. So I look at us exactly the way we're constructed. So I follow our energy, and I follow your memories the same way, because the memories that are the longest running, longest lasting are the ones that go from your childhood, and then I come into your present life. So I evaluate your energy in exactly a logical way that follows the way you grow and develop. The moment an impression becomes, I have a feeling response to it. I know that it's become contaminated. I know that I am responding to it, as opposed to identifying it. My intention is always to be accurate versus to be right or wrong. I have no interest in right or wrong. I gave that nonsense up long ago. My scale is accuracy. So now, when I teach, my intention is to instruct you to use this skill so that you have no need of me, but rather that you can utilize a perceptual system that helps you sense when you are losing power, why you are losing power, and what you're supposed to do about it. That's where we're going with this. My sense is that we are at an extraordinary turning point in human history. Now, I'm not the first to say that, and I won't be the last. But I am inclined to think that since the 1940s, since the nuclear age, our evolution has been on fast forward. And it's been on fast forward because we lack the spiritual maturity we should have had by now. So I think that what is occurring is that if you look at the uniting crisis point in all of our lives, that uniting crisis point is one in which again and again and again we are brought back to evaluate and become conscious, that is the word we want to look at, of the management of our power. What kind of power? The power of our thoughts, the power of our emotions, the power that we manage through our system. All of a sudden, the shift is taking place so that we are changing from being Homo sapiens, 5 sensory beings, to Homo noeticus, multiple sensory beings. I actually think that We are now two species living on this planet simultaneously. And that the Homo sapien is fundamentally a five-sensory creature who interacts with reality based on five senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, hearing. And what that means is that reality is in front of the person, coming toward you. Now think about this. And you're going to discover as I take you through your body that the bottom half of your body is coordinated to this material. And that your concept of power as a sapien is that your notion of becoming empowered equals your ability to develop power so that you can control the outside world as it comes towards you, so that you can regulate the force with which the outside world comes towards you. And your first tools that you will use to regulate it will be money, be sexuality. You'll use some tool that's located below your waist. You'll use a physical tool to control physical power. Now that's the Homo sapien world. Right? All of a sudden, we have a new model of species emerging. We are it. We are its crude variety. We are the first wagon with the wheels on it, so to speak. We're Homo noeticus. We are beings with multiple sensory systems. We are attempting to become fluent in perceiving not only physical matter, but energetic matter simultaneously. Now what that means is, if one of the fundamental laws of creation is that energy comes before matter, your allegiance in terms of creation will have to go to the activity behind your eye as having priority in creation than allegiance to the activity in front of your eye. Let me say this again. Instead of being able to say to someone, you ruined my day, I have to begin with the question of what is it that I am generating that is making my day lousy? I have to give up blaming others if I am suddenly working from the idea that I must be generating some kind of energetics that's creating and allowing this experience. That is a very different perception. When I teach you energy anatomy, I am teaching you the fundamentals of working with the science behind your eye, as opposed to working with the perceptions in front of your eye. I want to make that science as realistic and practical as possible. Instead of having spirituality in the theory sense, I want it in the physical, practical sense. We are reversing ourselves. And I also believe that we're living at a time that we've had 30 to 40 years to fill our heads with very different perceptions and very different truths. And that we've been given a period of grace to adjust ourselves to live congruently with these truths. And that in this decade, the madness that we're going through is a madness that comes from being incongruent with the things we know and now we need to live by. There is no more time to prepare. We must be congruent now. When I look at what I think of as energy anatomy, I consider this to be the new science of the management of the power that we maneuver through us. And that level of energy is a full-time job, is a full-time awareness. And that what we are finally going to create for ourselves is a model of health, a model of life, where we understand that the energy that comes through the top of our heads and gets routed through our minds and through our hearts and into our environment, that we are one and the same with our environment, with our bodies, with everything. Because as we work with ourselves as energetic beings, we can't help but see that we are one and the same. And now I'd like to clarify some points. Specifically, what are the chakras and what do I see when I'm doing a reading? Think of the chakras as 7 data banks, computer data banks in your body, beginning at the base of your spine. First one. Second one, the sexual genital area, lower back. Third one, the solar plexus or the stomach, abdominal region. Fourth is the heart. The fifth is the throat, neck area. The sixth is the mind, face, head, cerebral territory. The seventh, the top of the head. Each one of these logs a specific type of data. Now that's where the fascination comes in. We are a science. We are as organized and as refined as any science can possibly get. You log every single perception in one of those 7 chakras according to the quality of the power that that perception resonates. Let me give you an example. Every single issue that has anything to do with you developing your sense of self-esteem, every person that you associate with yourself, and you probably have never broken down your relationships in terms of which are the people in charge of helping me destroy or ruin my self-esteem. They come here. Which are the people that are in charge of helping me develop my mind? They go here. Which are the, you probably have never done that, but if you do, you'll notice that the people who come under the self-esteem category have all their data imprinted in your 3rd chakra. You log your experiences with them in this. And what does that mean? You know, Einstein made his very famous statement when he got into the realm of quantum physics, and he said, I can't believe the gods would roll dice with the universe, but they do. Meaning that there is an X factor that seems to be present in the dynamic of creation when energy becomes matter. I suspect that that X factor is exactly what I'm talking to you about today, which is the vote your consciousness has in the formation of energy. So that, let's say you have issues of low self-esteem, that converts into the quality of the cell tissue in this part, in the 3rd chakra area, or the solar plexus, the pancreas, the abdominal region. That forms that, okay? I will take you through this in great detail so that you know what goes where. But when you start thinking of yourself as a data system, and you begin to realize, I record every thought I have. Think of yourself logically, then shift to the scripture. I don't care what scripture you shift to, as long as it's authentic, whether it's Vedic, Judaic, Christian, the Quran, I don't care. Because truth is truth. And you'll see that the common teaching in all the scriptures that are worth their salt is get your attention in present time. Don't carry vibrations or perceptions with you that you do not need or that take power from you. The truth is, the scriptures are a book that offer instruction on the management of power, because that is exactly what we are living within our biological structure. It is one in the same thing. And that's what I want to teach you. So when I see the chakras, that's what I look at. That's what they are. They are the energetic complement of the physical anatomy. I refer to an 8th chakra. The 8th chakra is not in your physical body. I don't know where it is. For all I know, it seems to hover above the head. And I'm not sure it hovers there because I need to perceive logically 7 and then 8 on top of 7, and 7 being the crown chakra. Or because by nature of its content, it tends to be more impersonal and not that directly biologically related. Your 7 chakras are directly biologically connected to what happens to you. One of the principles that I have learned, and the principle that I work with again and again and again, is that your biography becomes your biology. And that is law. So that when I do a reading of someone, I am in fact interpreting their biographical information that is in the, quote, cell memory. This is how we make ourselves energetically. Now, when you think of this logically, and this will make sense more and more as you work with each one of these teachings, that you are an electromagnetic field. When you start working with chakras, and you start working with yourself as an energy being, you're going to finally take the law of magnetic attraction very seriously. Meaning, you attract to yourself what you vibrate. Now let me say this again. Let me say this 1,000 ways. If I can plant the idea early on in your head that when you learn to work with yourself as an energetic being, you're going to change the rules by which you have to live your life. And one of the rules is that you suddenly take the law of cause and effect and magnetic attraction very, very seriously. And you realize, I am attracting to myself opportunities, ideas, people, places, things, diseases, viruses, whatever, that in fact you have a vote in that. Now, we've had a global implant in the 1960s that has begun the changing of our species. And that implant is that we create our own reality. That thought form never existed prior to the 1960s at all. Now, it is the underlying thought form behind the holistic health movement, behind the environmental movement, behind the therapeutic movement. There isn't one form of life as we know it sociologically that hasn't been influenced by this notion that we have more power over our reality as individuals than we've ever before considered. Now then, that perception, where you've got to learn to distinguish it, is that you don't apply it to your personality, but to your energy. And where I've seen most people fall flat on their face is that they've taken that incredibly profound truth and given that truth license to command their personality, versus that truth becoming the reason why they know they need to develop a incredible rapport with the management of their energy. I'm going to say this again. Your personality is the first part of you that encounters anything, right? So when you take the truth, you create your own reality. You'll use that initially as permission to say, I don't want to go here, you can't make me do this. You'll use it as a way to determine what kind of relationship you want, whether or not you want sexual freedom. You will use it to give your personality privilege. And eventually, you'll find that it wears out, because that's not what it was meant to be used for. Rather, that perception was meant to cause us to begin the journey to the next level of our evolutionary maturity, which is, if we create our own reality, that means we have to become very conscious of the management of every thought form that we perceive and breathe life into. That requires the discipline of a mystic, not a personality temper tantrum, right? Which is why I find the need to do this series so crucial, because I have seen in the last 12 years, when people would come to my workshops and they would talk about their health, and they would say, I know I'm ill, and I know I'm responsible for this. I know I created this. And at first, in the early 1980s, there was this incredible enthusiasm that any illness could be healed. I know I created this, but I could heal this. But you know what? By the late 1980s, people were showing up saying, wait a minute here. I know I created this reality, but no matter what I do, nothing's changing. How come? And if you look at the holistic movement and the shift in consciousness that we've had in the last 30 to 40 years, and all of the impact, the fact is we should be having healings by the bazillions, and they're still so rare that they merit the bestseller list. Now there's something wrong. What's amiss here? What's amiss is that we've taken that incredible perception, we create our own reality, and we've applied it only to therapeutic use in the human personality. Now it's time to apply it to the management of our spirit. And that is a totally different world. And that's where learning your energetic anatomy follows suit. Now, my final note before I jump into the beginnings of the body itself, detail, if you will, is that when I was writing this last book, it became an extraordinary journey, as most authors will tell you, that, once you start writing a book, it is itself an archetypal journey. And what happens is this. As you sit down to write the book, you think you know what you're writing about. And you start to write it. And this is probably true of any project. And then you enter the desert. And you wait in the desert. And you wait for the spirit of the project to come meet you. And in order for you to cross the desert, you have to relinquish what you thought the plans were for the book and let the spirit of the book talk to you. That happened to me when I was writing Anatomy of the Spirit. I thought I knew what I was writing about. And then I went into the desert. And while I was in the desert, I was plagued, if not upset, by the notion that if I were going to teach people about their chakras, why can't I find that truth in other religions? Where are the 7 chakras in Christianity? Where are they? If I were to teach you other truths that are universal, thou shalt not kill, I can find that in any religious tradition, or don't steal. So where are the fundamental design of the human bio-spiritual system? Where is it in Judaism? Where is it in Christianity? How come it's only in the Vedic scriptures? I was really in a crisis. Then one day I was teaching. And I went to draw 7 circles on the board in a row vertically. And I was going to put the number 1 at the bottom and list the 7 chakras and begin to introduce the way I normally do. I turned to look at it, and all of a sudden, I literally saw the 7 Christian sacraments emerge in the 7 chakras. And I'm looking at this, and then I saw the Judaic tree of life, the Sephirot, merge into the 7 levels of God. The Judaic tradition, when Yahweh says, I give you these 10 powers, develop them and come home to me. And when the Kabbalists illustrated those 10, they partnered some of them so that they formed 7 levels, the tree of life, the 10 powers we need to have within ourselves. Then I looked at the Christian sacraments, not literally, but symbolically. And I realized that the first is baptism, which is tribal, which fits the first chakra. And all of a sudden, I saw a portrait of us that I never understood before, that included a portrait of the mystical teachings of the Judaic, Christian, and Vedic traditions, all around lessons of the management of our divine power within our lives. So that is going to be my closure text with you in this series. And that's that I will introduce to you the symbolic meaning of the sacraments and the Judaic tree of life into your biological spiritual system. I think you'll find that it's going to bring you a great deal of insight in terms of the fact that most of you are probably what I would call contemporary mystics. You are mystics without monasteries. You are people who have invoked a great deal of spiritual truth, wanting your life to be a path of spiritual clarity, without realizing that the same challenges that would have met you in the monastery are going to meet you in everyday life. The same madness is going to meet you. Only it's not vogue to go up to your boss and say, look, I'm having a mystical crisis. Would you mind if I take the week off? I mean, this kind of thing is not allowed to happen. But what is, the more you understand what's really going on in the world behind your eye, the more you can manage it.